until now, the XRP Ledger was sort of an island. It works really well, but it was self-resilient. I think in the last couple of years, we've seen people in the community very committed to building bridges in different directions. So there's a project that is building an EVM compatible bridge, so a sidechain that will allow any other product on any EVM blockchain to interconnect to the XRP Ledger.
This content is brought to you by Uphold, which is a great crypto platform that I've been using since 2018. Uphold has all the top cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and all the altcoins. In fact, they have 260 plus cryptocurrencies on their platform. You can also trade precious metals, stable coins, and 37 fiat currencies. In addition, they are available in over 150 countries. And this platform is fully reserved. They do audits, so you can trust that your funds are safe, no commingling, no lending out your funds. If you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is David Bchiri, who's the president of XRPL Commons. David, great to have you on.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be a guest on your podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to speak with you. Certainly been following the XRP Ledger, and I have a lot of XRP community folks who listen to my podcast and watch the videos. So excited to dive into XRPL Commons and the great things you guys are doing. But let's start with your background. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? And what's your professional background?
I'm from Paris. I grew up in Paris, did most of my professional career in France, moved a few years abroad to Silicon Valley. I'm a tech entrepreneur, always been in the tech industry. I'm an engineer. I did a few stunts in the web industry, purely web, like web consultancy. I had a few websites that were doing e-commerce. I helped a bunch of people launching their activity online. And then I had a consulting company that was specialized in innovation venues, incubator accelerators that got acquired. And the company that acquired us sent me to lead the US business for a while. So I've seen both the French tech ecosystem and the US tech ecosystem. And in the recent years, I was very focused on building communities, trying to build bridges between Europe and the US, trying to see where opportunities were arising for businesses or institutions to get a grasp on new technologies. And doing that from the Silicon Valley was really instrumental for me to discover a bunch of these new technologies, including blockchain. And yeah, in a nutshell, this is who I am.
And what was your first encounter with Bitcoin and crypto? And what was your aha moment? When did it click for you?
So I have two answers to that question. My first encounter with Bitcoin was in 2014 when a friend of mine who was running a youth hostel in South Africa sent us, me and a bunch of friends from school, a mail saying like, oh, I just met people who are deep into Bitcoins. I think we should all buy some. And my answer to that was, my background, my education was instantly answering to that. Like, I don't believe in easy money. So I just passed on that. And then later, 2019, I got asked by an insurance company to study blockchain, to see the potential of blockchain for the insurance industry. That's when I had a really big illumination, almost saying like, oh, this is what blockchain is about. This is very far from all the ideas I had. And I figured there's a potential in this technology that no one really understands and that no one really taps into. And that was my aha moment. And really, when the day I decided to really deep dive into that and make it, a full-time job for me working in blockchain was recent elections when a president claimed that the elections were maybe fraudulent. I felt that for once, the technology could have brought a proof, creating a layer of trust for people to believe in the outcome, whatever the outcome is, saying that technology for once could have been instrumental in creating trust. That was the really the moment I decided that I would deep dive into it and spend most of my awake time working on.
Yeah, no, and that's a great use case for blockchain, where voting and accuracy and efficiency will be incredible for future elections and put the past old world of unfair elections and false elections and so forth. That's a major use case, and I'm hoping governments can get that in place in the coming years. So how did you end up at XRPL Commons?
Well, I was experimenting a few projects. I was working in a different ecosystem at the time, doing some small projects, and I had a moment where I almost got into an argument with people about what is a green blockchain, and a lot of people were stating clean NFTs and clean blockchain were something, but no one could really prove it. And doing research, I stumbled upon XRP Ledger and the whole history of XRP Ledger that was really resonating with me in the way that I think people would design and started the XRP Ledger 11 years ago were contrarians. They were, going against the current. At the time, Bitcoin was the major blockchain, almost a unique blockchain, but they came with the different solutions, even though the vast majority of people in the ecosystem were telling them it was against the philosophy of Bitcoin. And I really, yeah, I could associate myself with this kind of thinking. Like there's, the majority of people are going in a direction. I'm like a salmon. I like to go against the current. And then I met people in the community. I started to investigate more and more. I saw that the community was very active. I saw that the developers and the builders in the community were, for most of them, they had been in the community for a long time, which also showed to me that it was a solid ecosystem. And there was a tipping point where, I met a few key people who really pushed me over the fence, and I decided that it would be the ecosystem I wanted to work in.
Oh yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I recently, I shouldn't say recently, but maybe over a year ago, even myself minted some NFTs on the XRP Ledger. So trying to build on it as well. So tell us about XRPL Commons. What is it and what's the mission?
So what is XRPL Commons? It's a nonprofit based in Paris, which mission is to create the conditions of success for developers and entrepreneurs to thrive in the XRPL ecosystem. And I can double click into the conditions of success, because that's what defines that's our North Star. My belief, and I would say because not everyone has to share it, but my belief is that the global adoption of blockchain will come mostly from institutions and big organizations, large organizations that will use blockchain as infrastructure to create trust. Right now we're in the very early days, even though blockchain has been around for 10 years. I think a global cycle of adoption for a technology is closer to 30 years, maybe 25 years. But if you look at how long it took for major innovations to spread and become, an everyday tool, it's almost all the time 30 years. So even though technology brings this cycle to a shorter period of time, it's still a very long period of time. So we're in the early days of adoption. I think we need to create conditions for developers and entrepreneurs to get into the space. And for that, we need to get companies, institutions to be willing to pay for solutions that solve a pain point. When you have a real pain point and someone comes up with a solution, you're ready to pay for it. Yeah. That's what creates a sustainable ecosystem. When people are willing to put money into a solution that will attract developers and builders to create these solutions that will, make good business over time. Yeah, just to add to that, I think the conditions of the market have shown that right now there's only room for utility on blockchain. I think a lot of people were either disappointed or doubtful that blockchain was doing any good to society. I think now is the time to prove them wrong, and the market has also tuned down media and the global hype of blockchain adoption. We can now focus on what really matters. So we are a very young organization in the ecosystem. XRP Ledger has been around for 11 years. We've been around for 9 months. So we're babies in the ecosystem, and we're building on what others have built before us.
So tell us how you're supporting the developers. Are you providing education, grants? How are you working with them?
Yeah, so we work on 3 different pillars. The first one is education. If you want the ecosystem to be vibrant, you need more talents to get into it. And we could teach ourselves, and open a school for XRP Ledger, but I think there's already a good infrastructure for education. They're called education platforms or universities or college or engineering schools. There are a lot of people already well organized, well trained to teach any sort of complex topics. So instead of doing that ourselves, what we want to do is empower teachers, universities, student associations to teach and learn. So we work with a number of partners right now in France, but our plan is to grow in Europe and then become global, help teachers teach blockchain. A lot of teachers really want to teach, but they don't have the knowledge required to create courses. So we create courses and we open source them. Everything we do is Creative Commons. So teachers can just grab the content from us, change whatever they want to change and go teach it. But we go beyond that. We also bring all the materials for technical classes, GitHub boilerplates. If you give homework to students, then you have to grade them. We provide the whole framework for them to do that in a very easy way. If we get into details, we're part of a group named Chaise in Europe. That's a working group that was started by the European Commission that started with a study that proved that just in France, we will need 10,000 people trained professionally on blockchain by 2026. Right now, we train less than 3,000. So there's a skill gap that someone will have to fill. And so we're just a tool in the machine to help it scale that education system. That's number one. The second pillar is dedicated to startups and developers. And what we're trying to do is empower them. First, before grants and before just resources, we have launched a residency, much inspired by an art residency in Paris, where we invite people for 12 weeks, wherever they come from. We fly them to Paris, we host them in a cozy co-living, and we give them a stipend so they can live in Paris for 3 months. And during these 3 months, they can focus 100% of the time on a project. Using XRP Ledger and trying to crack a case where there's a real pain point. The first cohort started in September and will demo their prototype product. We have a range of deliveries, but some of them came with a full-fledged company. Some of them came with just an ID. So of course the outcome is not the same for everyone, but during these 12 weeks, they were focusing on regeneration. How can they use blockchain, or how can they add a component to their business that creates a regenerative process that will help either grow value for communities, for living ecosystems, for Earth, or for society as a whole. The next cohort will start in January and focus on IP, intellectual property. And every 3 months, we want to tackle another topic. That's what we do for startups for now. And later in 2024, we will announce, I think it's like the first time I publicly announced that, but we're going to launch a new track in the XRPL grants program. Right now, it's totally independent, run by Ripple, but we'll add a new track to the grants program to help builders work on interoperability. So we might talk about that later, but as you know, there are a number of projects that are building sidechains on XRP Ledger, and we want to help these projects grow and scale. We're big believers in horizontal scaling, big believers in the future that is multi-chain, so we want to help them do that too. And the third pillar, sorry, I'm being a bit long here.
No, this is great. Yeah.
The third pillar, we call it adoption. It's trying to raise awareness in the world of large organizations and corporations and institutions, raise awareness to a public of C-level executives to help them understand and grasp the potential of blockchain in their specific industry. Not just explaining what an NFT is or how they can trade crypto on a blockchain, but more, your industry has a few pain points, and this is where blockchain will create exponential value. And this is, we found that it's a good way to open conversations that lead to projects. You need to start with the top of the pyramid if you want to trickle down the organizations. So yeah, in a nutshell, this is what we do. And we're trying to be global, even though we're centered in Paris right now. We have a space in Paris that's, I think, great for people to connect, dedicated first to the residency, to XRPL project, but we're also hosting a number of projects that are not yet in the XRP Ledger ecosystem, but we're very open, and we're getting more and more people interested in XRP Ledger just by hosting them around us. And it creates a lot of value for everyone working in an open environment. People come with no clear idea of what they can get from the XRPL ecosystem, and when they realize the quality of the people working and building on the ledger, plus the nature of what we do, they stick around. So having a physical space is already also very helpful to build relationships.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's great. I love the mission. And let's say there's a developer listening to this or watching this, or someone in the business industry. If they see a lot of different blockchains out there, what would you highlight as XRP Ledger's benefits and advantages to other blockchains out there?
Hi, everyone. Pardon the interruption. I'm Tony Edward, the founder and host of the Thinking Crypto podcast. I have a huge favor to ask you. If you haven't subscribed as yet on YouTube or the podcast platforms, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, hit the notification bell on the YouTube platform, and on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and review. It supports the podcast. It allows me to bring great quality content to you. Thank you for your support, and I'll let you get back to the content.
So I could give you all the selling point of the XRP Ledger as a protocol, but I would focus maybe on a few points. For new developers, we host here a training every other month for developers. It's not a training to become a developer. You come as a developer and you learn about XRP Ledger. And a lot of people coming here are already builders on other platforms or other protocols. Mm-hmm. What the aha moment they have is, oh, this is actually very simple to build on XRP Ledger. Mm-hmm. The barrier to entry, I taught myself Solidity, and I figured that I was never going to be a Solidity developer because the level of dedication is very high. You need to really dedicate yourself 100%. If you need to learn a new programming language, that's a lot of commitment. When you work on XRP Ledger, you can basically work with any modern language you already master. Python, JavaScript, Rust. There's a library for that. So that's a big barrier to entry that is basically not there for developers to get into the space working with XRP Ledger. And then I think what makes each ecosystem unique is the community, the support that you get from builders, people who have a lot of experience, who can share, and who are actually there showing up almost every day on all the channels there are out there to support people who have ideas and want to try things. I figured the community itself is very resilient, throughout the years. They're still there, and they're very open to sharing, which is not common to all the blockchain ecosystems.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you mentioned was interoperability, and I was going to ask, what are some of the Web3 applications that you see being built and along the lines of interoperability and so forth?
So if I may start with a very short segue to interoperability.
Sure.
Until now, the XRP Ledger was sort of an island. It works really well, but it was self-resilient, like living on its own world. And it's been like that for a decade. I think in the last couple of years, we've seen people in the community very committed to building bridges in different directions. So there's a project that is building an EVM compatible bridge, so a sidechain that will allow any other product on any EVM site, any EVM blockchain to interconnect to the XRP Ledger. So it's a bridge. It's a pretty simple integration, but it did not exist until now, and it will exist in 2024. So that's a big step towards interoperability. And it's a great market opportunity for a lot of projects on other chains that are in search of users, in search of liquidity, and we want to tap into the potential of XRP Ledger. And then there's another group in the community that has been building on adding features to the XRP Ledger. So as you may know, there's no smart contracts capacity on the XRP Ledger because most of what you can do is already packed in the protocol itself. It's basically simple calls to a library that will allow you to do very complex things like creating a multi-signature account or creating an escrow. Like with a few lines of code, you can do that very simply without even having to do a smart contract. Makes it very robust, but some developers in the ecosystem wanted to do more and be able to compose transactions. And here comes a sidechain named XRPL that has been launched very recently that will allow developers to build smart contracts on XRP Ledger. And what it unlocks, and you were asking about the use cases, we're seeing a lot of use cases around retail, how to let people pay in a physical store or online with any crypto and let the merchant get the currency they actually want. That's a big step in the ecosystem, and you can do that very easily with the XRP Ledger. How to do complex transactions, meaning that you will pay for something, at the same time you will get points as a reward, as a loyalty program, and then you will get a voucher for your next purchase. That is allowed by these new features that are brought to the XRP Ledger. And more recently, not sharing any big secrets, but there are a number of lending protocols that see the new features that the XRP Ledger brings, the automated market maker, that are attracting a lot of liquidity providers and lending protocols that want to tap into these features. So getting into the DeFi space, I think until now, XRP Ledger was more used for payments. This is what it's known for. But a lot of use cases have been built on XRP Ledger more in stealth mode that are now coming to life, and you will most probably hear about them in 2024.
That's exciting. And regarding the side chains, I've spoken to like David Schwartz and so forth about this, and how, for example, let's say a central bank wants to issue a CBDC or a stable coin, they don't want a lot of that data being out there. So there's some privacy there. Are you also seeing businesses may want to go that route, that if they build some sort of side chain for business purposes, they want certain information out there? Is that also another use case?
Absolutely. So for the central banks, I think the design is pretty clear that they will run their own chains, even if it's like a replica of the XRP Ledger, they will want to have full control over their chain, over the governance, and that's perfectly fine for a specific use case. Some may be on a public blockchain, some may need a private blockchain or semi-private blockchain. So I think this is the design that will be adopted by central banks. Now, when it comes to public institutions or private companies, I think a lot of them are willing to tap into the public blockchain. They see a value in that. Whenever you have a very heterogeneous ecosystem that needs multiple supplier or different actors working with the same data, they're willing to share the data across a platform that does not belong to anyone, that is not influenced by any specific actor. And I can give you one use case that we have right now in the aquarium, our residency. It's the ID card for cars. So if you have a car, it comes with a lot of different parts. Parts can be built by different suppliers. And one manufacturer will not want to use the same tool as another manufacturer unless the tool is neutral, does not belong to anyone, has a governance that's very public and verifiable, and making sure that the data cannot be altered by any actor. This is where a public blockchain comes in very handy. And we see this use case coming up right now for cars, but I think this can be replicated for a number of industries.
Yeah, it's amazing all the possibilities and all the great things that could happen, and especially on the XRP Ledger. Are there any, this might be a tough question, specific use cases that you're most excited about, that you make like, wow, this is great. I really like this.
Yes. So I'll try to keep a very short list, but there are discussions in Colombia. The government of Colombia is moving their public land registry to the XRP Ledger using XRP Ledger for farming. So for farming estates. This is very unique. This is very different from a payment solution, or they're using XRP Ledger for a system of proof. So this goes back to our mission or my vision. I want to use blockchain to create a layer of trust for everyone. This is a typical use case that I'm very excited about because it's not financial. It's not. It does not belong to the space of let's make money with blockchain, but more let's create intangible value that will benefit everyone. And yeah, I'm very excited about that because then you can apply that to most countries that don't have a reliable source of truth for their land registry can mimic the same project. So everything that tends to be notarization or stamp online on a blockchain, I'm pushing forward, and we have a number of conversations with public institutions in France that I cannot really disclose now because it's too early in the process, but I'm really excited about. Then decentralized identity, online credentials using blockchain, I'm very excited about too. I was in a meeting recently with the founders of Heirloom. They have a very unique approach to using blockchain for credentials, and right now they're tackling the use case. They're trying to expand the use case in the education world, so online diplomas, proof of attendance to classes and everything. But this can be expanded and scaled to a lot of other use cases. And their approach to user experience and how to onboard new users on chain is really unique. So also very excited about that.
Very cool. What's on the 2024 agenda? I know you mentioned like the expansion of the grant program. Is there anything else that we can expect in 2024?
Yeah, so the aquarium will focus on three topics that we already decided on. We have a lot of ideas, but these topics are already validated. The first one will be intellectual property. So how to use NFTs and blockchain to invent new business models, to incentivize creators in different ways, to share revenue across the value chain. That's something I'm really excited for. The next one will be decentralized identity. So align with the use case I was just mentioning, but trying to expand that more and further. And then decentralized science. Decentralized science has been one of my favorite use cases in the blockchain space since I discovered blockchain. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, can you expand on that?
So yeah, sure. DeSci is this idea of using the building blocks of Web3. So collective governance, collaborative funding, using NFTs as a proof of intellectual property or a proof of ownership to anything, whether an idea, a patent, anything. Combining all that to reinvent the way people do research. So right now, research is a very structured and I would say a difficult world for newcomers. So young researchers starting their PhDs really have to start at the bottom of the ladder. They do a lot of publication almost for free. They don't get any share of the revenue generated by their own research. The publication space is also being reinvented today or being disrupted, depending on your point of view, because the people who create the value do not benefit from it at the end of the day. And so you can see a parallel with the rise of the NFT space in the last couple of years. And some researchers have seen the potential of that and are building DAOs as research labs. So you can imagine a world where people will invest in the research that they really care for and decide what to do with the IP, whether to monetize it, how the distribution should be done. And that's a perfect use case for blockchain. And that is something I'm excited to experiment here at Commons. That is one thing that will happen in 2024. And then there are a number of projects apart from the grants or apart from the aquarium. There are a number of projects that we want to produce and promote. So we want to intensify our work on education and create an experience for educators and students, whether you are part of a university or you're in your bedroom somewhere on another continent. We want to give everyone the same chance to access content and quality classes. So how do we use technology to create an experience that is good for everyone and that doesn't leave anyone behind? That's something we're excited for too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to see those items roll out. And what fascinates me is the science aspect that you mentioned. That's very, very, very interesting. And it goes back to what you're talking about. If there's a problem, bringing solutions to the table and helping improve the way we can research, communicate, do business, and so forth. So that's great. I want to talk about the crypto market at large. Obviously, the crypto industry has seen significant growth. There's been more adoption. One of the things here in the United States that we're dealing with is lack of clarity, and we have the SEC versus everything at this point. I'm sure in Paris, in France and other countries in Europe, there's not this issue because these currencies are classified as virtual currencies. What are your thoughts on the Ripple versus SEC situation and the XRP, getting the clarity there?
So first of all, I'm not a lawyer in case, so my opinion is worth whatever it's worth. But I've intentionally decided to start Commons from Paris in France because I've had the intuition early on that France was committed to give a clear framework for crypto regulation. It's not at all an easy one. It's not crypto friendly or liberal in any sense, but it gives clear guidelines. Like, this is the red line. You can do anything within that scope, and I think that's what entrepreneurs need. They need a framework, and maybe the framework will expand with time as people get more used to the tools. As we're going to open new use cases and say, like, okay, we need clarity for this use case. But it's by design, it's clear, and Mika is being updated. It will bring a lot of mandatory aspects to builders, and we can double click on that later if you want. But we see that happening, and so we're preparing for the next evolution. So everyone is confident building on XRP Ledger. Building anywhere else where either you have a regulation that is against the crypto economy or the blockchain ecosystem as a whole is hard. It's really hard. And so, to be honest, like a year ago, when we were still doing all the prep work for Commons, we had a few conversations with institutions where they were like, XRP Ledger, really? I'm not sure. There's a case open right now with the SEC. Should we really, we don't want to engage it's too soon. We don't know exactly. And now that the case is getting closure, and we have sort of a statement that says that we're clear from the SEC jurisdiction, we can have these conversations. Public institutions are opening the doors, and we're not that they want to build everything on XRP Ledger. We're not there yet, but they're open to conversations. Also, people from other ecosystems who have seen XRP ledgers, sometimes for wrong reasons, to be honest, as not very competitive or a centralized protocol, or they had wrong ideas about the XRP ledger. The SEC case also brought light on the whole ecosystem. Like, oh, they're actually doing things the right way. Because the whole ecosystem was in the spotlight. I mean, mostly Ripple, but it also forced the whole ecosystem to do everything by the book. If you launched a business on XRP Ledger in the last 3 years, then you needed to be compliant with whatever regulation you had to comply with locally. So I think on the long term, that creates a lot of value, because all the businesses that are building on XRP Ledger are doing it well. They're all compliant. I don't know all, maybe it's overstating, but they had to do everything in the most sensitive way. So not overdoing it, but doing it in the good way. So that brings a lot of confidence. The level of trust globally on XRP Ledger is high.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I mean, and I'm glad that the case here in the United States is at least bringing some relief to concerns people may have, and they're feeling more confident. And to your point, the case did highlight that Ripple and the community and all these folks were doing a lot of things right. And it's great that where you're at least in the European region, that the MiCA regulations are in place, and like you said, may not be perfect, but at least it gets the ball rolling, and you guys as entrepreneurs and innovators know where the red line is. So do you see further iterations of the MiCA regulations and fine-tuning and so forth?
Yes, so there are a few things we already know about in terms of disclosure. So any business building on a blockchain will have to disclose a number of things that the blockchain provides for them, or the impact that the blockchain has for them. So, for instance, we work right now on a decarbonization strategy for the XRP Ledger protocol, and we've seen that MiCA in the next 6 months will make it mandatory for any business using blockchain to disclose the energy consumption, the energy per transaction, the kind of hardware you're using. And so that's you need, if you want to comply with MiCA, you will have to provide these reports, and that's very hard to do. You need to be a carbon market expert to do that. So what we're trying to do is create the tools for builders to generate their report in a couple of clicks without having to worry too much about that. Trying also to create a good UX for builders. So, if you want to focus on your technology or on your business, someone in the ecosystem needs to provide the support to make it easy for you to generate your report and be MiCA compliant. So this is what also we're trying to do, going back to creating the conditions of success for everyone on XRP Ledger. You will need tools. So Commons is building these tools, not alone. We're doing that with the community. We work also with Ripple on a number of projects. We work with the XRPL Foundation on a number of projects. We're trying to fit in the ecosystem, creating value where it's needed.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. David, I got some wrap-up questions here for you. First is if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be about?
That's an easy one. I'm part of a project led by the IE University in Madrid, and they called it the Metaversity. So bringing together a number of universities, and imagine you could learn anything from anyone, having the same experience as if you were right now in a class in Australia or with the teacher that you always wanted to learn from, who is in India, but you're in New York, and the Metaversity, I think, would be a great place to learn.
Oh yeah, I love that idea. David, I absolutely think that's the future of learning. Honestly, it's coming. Yeah,
and also like pushing that further. If you were to study Middle Age in the Middle Age, that would be much more funny than learning it from your classroom. So I'm thinking also the immersive experience of learning will help you go to places you've never been before to learn from it.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing. I got some rapid fire questions here for you. First is favorite food.
Favorite food, couscous.
Favorite musician or band.
Stevie Wonder.
Favorite movie.
Don't Judge Me, The Goonies.
Favorite book.
Favorite book, my favorite author is Joseph Kessel. He's a French author. He wrote the Army of Shadows. I read it at least once a year.
Oh, awesome. And when you're not working at XRPL Commons, what are you doing for fun as a hobby?
I am a calligrapher, so I do a lot of drawing and also a leather craftsman. So sometimes I make wallets and bags and stuff like that. I'm very manual. I like to do things with my hands.
That's awesome. David, pleasure chatting with you. And I'm excited to see the future updates around XRPL Commons in 2024. We'll have to have you back on to talk about the latest updates, but thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I have even a better idea. How about you? Next time you're in Europe, come to see us in Paris.
I love that.
It's an open invitation whenever you're in Paris.
Oh, thank you. I love that. I'll talk to my wife and we'll try to make that happen. Awesome. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Tony.